Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Let's see. I cannot hear you. Not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me.
Okay. Let me see. I'm going to check my speakers and under preferences for the meeting. I go to Zoom preferences. And it looks like I'm coming through.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, you can't hear me. I don't
but
know.
You still can't hear me.
No, I can't.
Okay. What if will you check your preferences on the so if you go to Zoom US and just check preferences right there, you might be able to see which speaker. I'm saying this out loud and you can't hear me. Let me I'm gonna call you.
Use the phone? You want to use the phone instead?
Well, let me just
Hey, Darcy.
Hi. I'm so sorry. This is totally
good.
normal. Yeah, I think it's just normal kind of.
Yeah, the wonky technology stuff.
Do you want to check under if you go to Zoom us.us in the corner,
Okay.
you can check to see if your speakers are hearing you.
Gotcha.
Or if
Do I
you're
go to About Zoom?
Yeah, I in my screen it's like where it sometimes says file, it actually just says Zoom US.
Okay, I see the Zoom US, provide Zoom feedback services, check for updates, uninstall Zoom. I'm trying to find where the speakers are.
Maybe it's under the next one. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
It's under preferences.
Preferences. Let me see. Why don't I try to? I see a. Maybe I should try it on my phone, or I don't know, because I don't see preferences on here. Help. Let's see. Sound. Change the sound output setting. If you can't hear sound from your Mac, let's see. Unplug any headphones or external speakers on your Mac. Choose Apple menu. On systems preferences, click sound and click output. Okay. Let me go to systems preferences.
Sorry that this is.
Oh no, it's all good. These things happen.
Yes, especially on Wednesday morning in what seems to be really early, but it's not that early. Yes. Okay.
We're winning.
We are winning this morning.
Look, this is a new MacBook that I have, Darcy. So I am trying to maneuver. I just got it yesterday. My It's good to hear your voice. It's good to see you.
It's so good to see you. And I'm so glad that, yes, I know that yesterday you were trying to get a new computer. Congratulations. Sometimes.
Grateful to have the resources just to go out and buy one. But
Exactly. Yes. Yes. That is a blessing. Well, I'm so grateful to have you here this morning. And so we've been at Park Avenue, we've been doing these sort of several offerings during the week. And this is what evolved from what was just kind of meditation, short meditations that were offered on Wednesdays. And then it started becoming like more poignant conversations. And for me, a definite way that I connect is connect to God is through people. So I've just been really excited to get to chat with folks that I know are just doing this incredible work and so deep and have so just such a wealth of knowledge and spirituality, and in your case, like healing and self-care, and just all of these wonderful things that that we can share with people. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
thank you for inviting me and thinking of me enough to join you in conversation. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, yes. Your work is so amazing. First, you're present. I mean, even in our planning of this, you were like, just sending me thoughts and prayers, and it was just, I mean, you are just an incredible human. And so it's my pleasure. I've been like, we've got to work together. So if this is like one small step.
I know. We're going to do it, Darcy. We're doing it now.
We're doing it. This is the beginning, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. So, so as I framed this as kind of pride theology, and maybe redefining what that means in some folks' minds. Because this time, I mean, today in itself, I can name, 17 things that are going on in the world, not the least of which is that today is the 5-year anniversary of the massacre at Mother Emanuel AME. And so just the layers of what is happening right now. And I think, it's high time that in my goal, every particularly white queer person will be very schooled in how all liberation, right, is innately tied together. And so that what would actually be a true pride theology would be Black liberation, queer liberation, trans liberation, ability liberation, patriarchy liberation, like all of it. So I'm excited to talk to you about some of that. Also, I want to talk and highlight work that you've been doing. I've been really obsessed with this one poem. Can we start with this poem as sort of like a benediction for our time right now? Or, I mean, do benedictions have to start at the end or go at the end?
I love how you're pushing against tradition.
Right. We can just put it out there. And put this hope out there, which is a poem that, I'm sorry, I'm actually like searching it. That just kind of came over me as I wanted to
no worries.
I wanted to find it. Yes, here it is. So it's a poem that people are probably going to be like, really, this poem again? But it's a poem by an author named Kai Miller, and it's called The Book of Genesis. And so I came upon it in a podcast I listened to called Poetry Unbound. But I think in this time of change, radical revolution, liberation, that maybe it's a word of speaking us into what could be. Anyway, I'll stop talking. And now this will be the words of Kai Miller in the Book of Genesis. Suppose there was a book full of only one word, let, from whose clipped sound all things begin, fir and firmament, feather and the first whale, And suppose we could scroll through its pages every day to find and pronounce a let meant only for us. We would stumble through the streets with books open, eyes crossed from too much reading. We would speak in auto rhyme and the world would echo itself. And still, we'd continue in rounds saying let and let and let until even silent dreams had been allowed.
Beautiful. Let's.
I want to, ooh, yeah, let. So let
Yeah.
that be our possibility this morning, and maybe potentially for Christianity, let's say.
I love it.
Well,
Yeah,
so
in many forms.
mhm, yes, Christianities.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Kyndra, will you introduce yourself and tell us? Um, I love the way that a good friend of mine asks it is like, what community sends you on your larger vocation? That can be like big or small, however you interpret that.
What community sends me on my larger vocation? That's a great question, Darcy. I would say my ancestors, particularly my ancestors from my matriarchal line, are fairly present and strong in my life. I would say that a great cloud of witnesses send me
Mhm.
from mentors, friends, family members who have moved beyond this realm, who have spoken into my life in such a way to maintain their steadiness in my heart. I will say that my parents send me. Pamela Frazier and Sammy Frazier, who have been married for, I believe, 42 years this year. They've been together since they were 16 years old and 23. So their union always lifts me. I will say that my sisters send me. Kaylin Frazier and Sophia President, she's known on as Facebook, and Kenya Hines. I would also say that the communities that I'm attached to send me. That would be people within the American community, people within the LGBTQ community, and people within communities that believe in justice, wholeness, love, and healing. Those are the communities that send me. And also my spirit friends, spirit guides, my guardian angels, they all send me to this moment to be present with you. So thank you for that question. My name, as Darcy said, is Kyndra Frazier, Reverend Kyndra Frazier. I am ordained through the Alliance of Baptist denomination, ordained right at Oakhurst Baptist Church in Decatur, Georgia, where Reverend Lanny Peters and was my pastor, along with Melanie. And it's just been such an honor to be able to do professional ministry at the intersection of clinical social work. I am currently the founder and CEO of Kind Consulting, Inc. Kind stands for Knowing Yourself in Need of Devotion. And we are an organization that believes in offering trauma-informed care through a variety of services. So that looks like, again, I'm a clinical social worker. So that looks like offering direct services, individual couples and family, as well as offering trauma-informed training. There's a curriculum that I developed in 2018 called Becoming a Trauma-Informed Church, where I introduce lay leaders to how to respond, how to recognize signs and symptoms of trauma, how to resist re-traumatizing folks, especially within the church, how to respond to people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, how to de-escalate crises. And it's a very interactive model that has 3 tracks. And so we do that not only for ecclesial communities, but also for corporate entities. I also Kind also engages in executive listening for corporate entities, which are 30-minute sessions that we offer to executives to minimize the stigma of mental health, because there's still such a high stigma of mental health. I am also the founding executive director of Hope Center Harlem. I'm no longer there, but Hope Center offers 10 free sessions to the Harlem community. And it was such a joy and a gift to be able to be their founding executive director for almost 4 years. And I am also the former associate pastor of congregational care and wellness at First Corinthian Baptist Church, right in Harlem, as well as a filmmaker. I am working with my film partner, Katina Parker, to co-direct and co-produce the documentary series, A Love Supreme, Black, Queer, and Christian in the South, where we follow about 8 families who have LGBTQ folks in their family systems who have found ways to either love beyond the limits of their prejudices or are still navigating and wrestling what it looks like to reconcile the love that they have for their LGBTQ loved ones and then the poor theology that is preached from the pulpit. So that is a me in a nutshell. I'm a friend, I'm a lover, I'm a healer, I'm a sister, I'm a niece, I'm a granddaughter, and it just gives me such joy. Like you said, connection is God. And so to connect with folks like you and have powerful conversations. So I'm grateful.
Wow, thank you. There is so much that you do and that you're pushing the boundary toward more openness and healing. And I mean, you're a hero, a shiro of so many, I'm sure, myself included in that. Yeah, so there's so much. Trauma informed churches. Yes, that is such a need in the world. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have 2,700 questions. I feel like the pastoral care, and so we both went to Candler. We
Yeah.
never overcrossed at that space, which is funny. I think we actually met while I was still in Candler, but you had completed the program.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
And so I do think, particularly, I guess I can only speak to this one program, but I do think the pastoral care training that I received and that I really pursued through art making at Candler, was really well informed, right? And I learned narrative model and different models, but as of yet, I have not read like trauma informed as a model of caregiving, and I know that it is so important, and in the context of Park Avenue particularly, and I think a lot of affirming spaces, we need to be trauma informed. I think a lot of what we go on, what I go on, is like having experienced that, I can, obviously refer out to professional care. But can you speak a little bit to the intersectional trauma that people come into church spaces with, when it comes to being, LGBTQIA, or and having grown up in a context, let's say, that isn't affirming, and somehow that is often compounded with like an embedded white theology that that can be as well, is traumatizing, right? It's not always the case, I think, that those overlap. Does that make sense, my question? It's kind of...
It does. You gave me a whole lot, so I'm gonna try to offer an answer in bite-sized pieces. I love it. So I'll start out with talking about how we all, as individuals, belong to a family system, right? We'll start off as small as possible. And our family systems, whether that is a mom and dad and a child, or just a mom and a child, or just a dad and a child, or a grandmother and a child, whatever your family system looks like, let's start there. So in our family systems, we can experience a myriad of challenge and dysfunction that stems from maladaptive family patterns. And I will speak for my family. I know on both sides of my family family members navigate alcoholism, they navigate substance abuse, they've navigated domestic violence, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and those, I mean, and with chronic poverty, which I would say is on one side of my family system, those things lend itself, which are all adverse childhood experiences, to an increased risk of teenage pregnancy, an increased risk of mental health vulnerabilities, an increased risk of high blood pressure, an increased risk of cardiovascular diseases, and the list could go on. And
Mhm.
so you have many Black folks who live in zip codes where access to health care and mental health care are not readily available. And because the zip code to health paradigm is real, where your zip code dictates your health and well-being, there are a myriad of other chronic issues that can arise. So that's one layer, family, right? The next layer, I believe, are these institutions that we occupy. So that looks like our school systems, that looks like our faith institutions, that looks like our workplaces, right? And if you are working in environments that are not attached explicitly to wholeness, which is a part of my theology,
Mhm.
love, and abundant living, that means valuing and respecting every human being, regardless of how they show up in the world, then it will always be a problem. And there are not many institutions that are attached to love, the ethic of love in a real way, wholeness, and life more abundantly, right? And so we move into these church spaces specifically where many of our traditional Christian practices, and I'll say as a whole, have been co-opted, as you said, by colonialism,
Mhm.
white colonialism, which has stripped most, specifically African Americans, away from their first fruits.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when I say first fruits, what I mean by that is from our indigenous practices.
Mhm.
And so I remember in 2014, when I was sitting in my room in grad school while I was going to Columbia, and I was like in a kind of like a wake sleep. You know how you just in the middle, in between, Darcy?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, Spirit was like, I need you to build an altar.
Mhm.
You need me to build an altar? I don't know what the hell is supposed to go on this altar. So I just started putting what I'm led to put on the altar, excuse me, and finding out things along the way. But in African traditional religious practices, you build your ancestral altar before you build any other altars to any other deities. And I will say, for those that are listening who are not familiar with Yoruba or Ifa or other traditional religions, that these deities or orishas are aspects of the divine, aspects of God. And so my journey of being more attached to my first fruits started more intentionally in 2014. Although I will say, as a teenager at 14, I was introduced to modalities such as channeling, such as Yoruba, such as meditation. And so those things have followed me. But in Black church spaces particularly, there can be a challenge in welcoming all of those parts, because
Mhm.
colonialism has made us fearful of those first fruits. And those first fruits are what can be salvific for us. I mean, every morning when I get up, Darcy, I light a candle on my ancestral altar. And I say, good morning, ancestors, spirit, friends, spirit guides, guardian angels, grandmothers, Grandma Cochran, Grandma Nell, Granny, Papa, Grandfather John, grandmothers and grandfathers I have yet to remember. Thank you all for being with me on this journey. Thank you for seeing me, loving me, nurturing me, guiding me, directing me. I honor you. Thank you for honoring me. I mean, every day. And that grounds my day. That connects me to something beyond myself. It also connects me more holistically to the people and the communities around me. So I remember that I'm not doing this work alone.
Wow.
Yeah. And I feel like I still have to answer some more of your questions. So trauma in the church space. We have to remember that the church is a hospital, that what is out in the world is also in the church, that when people have unhealed trauma, it can look like jealousy, it can look like envy, it can look like a variety of mental health vulnerabilities. It could also look like a variety of, I like to call them lower vibrating frequencies, you know, those principalities that some church folk refer to as demons, attaching themselves in ways that keep you from seeing the glory of yourself. And so you don't see the glory in other people. And you end up treating people in traumatic ways because you haven't accessed your own healing. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Yeah.
100%. Wow. You are so, I, the way that you begin your day is the way that you are in the world. I mean, you really do bring that feeling. And I would say there is so much power in these ways of knowing that are ancient, you know, and it to me is one of the things I grieve, and I think also motivates my own vocation, is the ways that white colonialism, white theology, um, uh, a whole system of white supremacy has really stripped so much out of what is a rich way of knowing and being in the world, and made it this omnifocus, right? This false dichotomy or false way of believing that there's only one way of being. And so as a practitioner of embodied arts, I'm very grateful to those who have told me and and reminded me at times that these ancient ways of embodying practice are not anything that I created at all. This
Right.
is something far beyond. And I think
Mhm.
that that's what, you know, so much of what you were saying really spoke to me, is like, those folks that remind me of that are a blessing. You know, it's a blessing to be reminded of the larger context. And, you know, to respond also to what you were saying, is like, I think so much trauma right now exists in white folks because we don't have that connection to our ancestors. Or, you know, and Reverend Keith Menhenick, who's a mutual friend of ours and one we've been trying to work with also, you know, asked this really poignant question in a sermon he gave at Park Ave several weeks ago. It was the end of February. And he said, you know, how do we redeem our ancestors? You know, for folks, for
Wow.
white folks, right? So how do I redeem my ancestors to be able to say, good morning, like, I see you, you know, and to be forgiven, to forgive them is to be in some ways redeemed myself, you know, to a way of knowing that is so powerful, as like what you were just describing. That is just so beautiful.
That's beautiful. I think one way that your ancestors can be honored, what's coming up for me now, is that you all offer healing to them. Because the only way that you show up and massacre a whole generations of people is that you're not attached to the divinity within you.
Right.
Yeah,
And you described that
there's a
so
level of healing
beautifully.
that's required. Yeah.
Yeah, you described that so beautifully with folks in church. I'm like kind of new in the church game, real honestly. I mean, I grew up and we went to Catholic mass and I did the sacraments and things, but then I didn't go to, we didn't have a community centered around church. And so the first time I had that, it was like 10 years ago. And so seeing folks, you know, who were, you know, my church, my original church, I would say is recovery. And so there's no point in going to a recovery meeting if I'm not ready to change and grow. Right. And so, as you said, church to me is a hospital. Church to me is a place to change and grow. And, yeah. And so let's talk about, gosh, there's so much. I kind of had these like super lofty goals for this conversation. I want to just know all that you know.
Do we have an hour? Do we have 40 minutes? What?
Yeah. You know,
okay.
We'll talk for another 20, 25 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
I don't want to hold you all morning.
This is what I was looking forward to. So hold me long to Darcy.
Okay, good. Well, we'll keep it going. So recently here in Atlanta, we had a march that was like an LGBTQIA BIPOC community supporting all of the rallies that have been happening here in Atlanta. And I wasn't able to go, but I did make a little sign that now is on my front door, which is kind of simple and maybe it's misunderstood by folks, but it says no justice, no pride.
No justice,
no justice, no pride.
Gotcha.
And so I want to talk about, and also you're originally from New York, correct?
Originally from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm from the South. I'm a Southern girl.
Yes, I should have been hearing it. I've been hearing it. You are in New York right now. And so, yeah, I want to talk about maybe we could get into how it happened, but I think we understand, like, you know, colonialism, white supremacy. I called it recently, you know, orthodoxy married empire. And this is what happened in terms of a faith system that divorces head from heart and you know, and doesn't see holistically the value in everyone. But how do we find ourselves in a time, this is such a huge question too, where white gay Christians see, or maybe don't see, the connection between Juneteenth, Friday, and Pride as a Pride Month, as a celebration. I mean, that's so big. How do we get here? Kyndra, tell us. Maybe I can frame it in a different way. Frame it however you want.
The first thing that comes to mind, there's this picture that I put on my Facebook cover page a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, that says, I am another other. I believe that's what it says. I am another other. And what it speaks to is this illusion of separation, right?
Yeah.
Although we are diverse manifestations of the divine, mind, source, whatever you want to call the higher power, we are all a part of the same flow.
Right.
It is an illusion to believe, Darcy, that I am disconnected from you because you show up with no melanin, you show up as white, you show up with a different cultural experience, you show up with a different theological bent because your experiences are different. It is an illusion to believe that we are separate, but we have bought into the hype, and slavery, chattel slavery did that work. Chattel slavery continues to show up in our prison industrial complex. And it also shows up in church spaces, particularly in the Black church, because that's my context when you think about how internalized racism works. And it's real. There is a way that not just LGBTQ people and straight people separate themselves, but white, Black, Asian people, so on and so forth, separate themselves. Various denominations, whether that is Episcopalian, Baptist, Catholic, separate ourselves. Political entities separate themselves. I mean, we are built on the illusion of separation, right, which is how we can get here. which is how we can say police who are steeped in white supremacy can murder Black and brown bodies, whether those are trans men and women, whether those are Black men and women, because there is some level of disconnect. And they believe that we are not them and they are not us. So I feel like our calling as spiritual leaders is to break through the illusion. And that shit is hard as hell, because not everybody wants to do that hard work. That's heart work. That takes some heart and some courage and some power and some transcendence over our own egos to do what is required of us to move beyond the separation. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what's coming up for me right now.
That is so right on point. I've been thinking about it. I love to hear, I just love how to hear how you're articulating these ideas. I've been thinking about it as like asking the question, like, how do we recognize our mutual destiny? Use like a King reference, but how do we recognize our mutual destiny? And yeah, I think there are so many, the individualism, the being separated from community physically, the distance that happens, in the separation between rural and suburban. I mean, that's kind of just to name some things that are popping up for me that are outside of what you're saying. Yeah. When did this independence, and I mean, it's all steeped in this American identity, which was based around rationalizing slavery, down. And so, yeah, I love the idea, shatter the illusion that we are separated. And I feel that connection immediately. And I think that you allow people to connect with you because maybe that illusion is shattered, that you're seeing the reality of the connections.
To me, it's all about kindred energy. If you don't feel in alignment with my vibration, I can't rock with you, regardless of what ethnicity you are or what theological suppositions you have. It does not matter. If my spirit does not feel it, then I don't move forward. And I think that there is a way in which we're tribal, right? We're tribal beings, and we're disconnected from our original selves, which are our divine selves. And so we feel most comfortable with communities that look like us. And for me, I've tried to live my life and create experiences and opportunities where I'm with folks that don't look like me. That's one reason why I decided to go to Oakhurst Baptist Church after I graduated from Kyndra, because I wanted to be a part of a faith community that did not look like me. I mean, it's predominantly European American folks, which was quite a different experience than I was used to. But it helped me evolve in some beautiful ways. I mean, I went off to Brazil for a summer to intern at a Baptist church there for 3 months. And they didn't look like me, but they were kindred spirits. And they would say, Kyndra, you make a home anywhere, because the vibration is similar and in alignment. So I can find home in realness and authenticity and love and wholeness and people that are attached to abundant living. And I think that is a challenge for many of us who find ourselves in minority groups, socially constructed minority groups, that it can be very difficult to see beyond the injustice that are placed upon us and move forward in a way where love makes room for the connection. And I'm committed to staying in a vibration of love, regardless of how people treat me, which is a hard, I want to curse right now, but it is hard as AF. It's hard.
Yes. Yes. I mean, especially because, with that openness comes a certain level of empathy. And I don't know if identify in that way, I tend to really, get a vibe from folks. And my wife hates it when I say, the empath, the E word, empath.
Ooh, we are both empaths.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, so with that comes, yeah, a level of needing to care for yourself. And I think that's a great next question. And yeah, as we move in this time, which is, I think, this unveiling is what I've been calling it, this unveiling of what has been and always has been in the United States, right? The commodification of bodies and people, and the violence that rationalizes in some folks' minds, whether consciously or subconsciously. Um, it's such a fraught time, to say it, in a really, really simple way, maybe understated way. Um, how do you prioritize self-care in a time like this? How do you know, and maybe it is that vibration that you're talking about. How do you know, which person you're going to say, yeah, I can do that interview, and how much to give, or when to, yeah, how do you care? How do you care for you?
That's a great question. In April, because I was wearing many hats, I transitioned from my previous assignment in terms of employment June 2nd. And so in April, I found myself tiptoeing on the fragility of my mental health.
Mm.
I was creating a virtual fundraiser, which was supposed to be at an institution, and we had to pivot very quickly because of COVID-19. I was teaching a motivational interviewing class for first year MSW students at Columbia. I was supervising my 4 interns. I was reading through their notes. I was taking care of the electronic health record system. I was leading my staff. In addition to that, I was doing some other contract work for Kind. And so I didn't recognize that I wasn't making room for self-care like I should have until I hit my limit. And when I hit my limit, I started creating boundaries with people. So boundaries, I would say, is the first point of self-care. We have a boundary system that we all occupy. And we have 2 boundaries that we occupy. Internal boundaries, which is when you could say something and I don't agree with it, but despite me not agreeing with it, you're still able to hold on to what you believe and you're not moved by it. And then there's external boundaries, right? How we keep our physical bodies safe. And so I found myself setting a lot of emotional boundaries, being like, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. I'm being very intentional about articulating and using my voice and saying what I do like, what I don't like, and speaking truth to power in ways that can get you in trouble in institutionalized spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say much more than that, but
Heard. Heard.
yeah. So that's one thing. Boundaries have been important. And then I was reminded, my life coach owned Boogie. I worked with him for about 1.5 years, maybe about 4 years ago. And he had this affirmation that said, I am my own point of origin. I am my own point of origin. And what I am my own point of origin means is that I get to be in control about what I experience and what I create, not the media, not the news, not my family, not my friends, me alone and my relationship with God. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's been interesting how this COVID-19 quarantine experiences has come about, because as a clinician, I've had to hold space for people who are wearing the mask, are wearing the suits, are wearing the gloves. And I've also had to hold space for people whose anxieties have risen, who have developed generalized anxiety from wearing masks, from wearing the gloves, so they can't do it. I've had to hold space for those 2 spectrums, as well as people who are floating in between. And as a clinical social worker, I have to create a non-judgmental space for people to be able to show up. And that informs how I show up as a pastor too. And so caring for myself during this time looked like going home to quarantine with my family. I wasn't worried about passing on nothing to them because that's not my vibration. And I don't, at this point, Darcy, I don't feed into fear, and I don't allow fear to be spoken over me. And so when I went home for a month, May 8th through about June 13th, I mean, my sister and I, we went to Greenville, South Carolina. We went to a beautiful creek that we love that has these amazing waterfalls. They were opening up a bit sooner, so we were able to sit in a restaurant and have a nice socially distanced lunch. I mean, we went to Charleston, South Carolina, and went to the beach, got a house, had a good time, practiced ritual, practiced building community amongst each other. I went to Atlanta, Georgia to see some friends for a week and to commune, and because that's what I need to be well. To have strength of mind, to have peace of mind. And I want people to hear, to know who are watching this, that you get an opportunity to control your own narrative. You get an opportunity to control your own narrative. And one of the things that I do to take care of myself too, is I don't watch the news. I know I'm going to get it through social media. I know somebody's going to send me a good article. I know somebody's going to send me a video of the next person getting murdered. I know I'm going to get it. So I don't watch the news. I just don't.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, boundaries are so important, right? And so how do we say to folks who maybe never felt like they had control over their own narrative, you have control over your own narrative? Like, that is so powerful. And one of the ways that I love
too. That comes with a lot of consequences. Yeah,
it does. I mean, it really does. A responsibility and consequences. And yeah, and offering, for me, just I'm always thinking about telling story, and whether we tell it by just deeply listening and being present and holding space like you suggested, or I love to encourage folks to express their narrative in visual form, because sometimes I just don't have the words and I don't know the feeling. And I think right now, particularly, we're in this like new old place, right? But like a new place of overlapping anxieties and realities that have been, but confronting that, I think, particularly for white folks who tend to live in this denial, under the veil kind of place, at least in my own experience of becoming more awakened, that can be really harsh to wake up to and try to then process, right? Like an adult. But yeah, I just love right now, whenever I see and connect with friends that are therapists or my own therapist, I'm like, y'all are just so needed in the world right now. Thank you. Thank you. My gosh, the way that you all make space. And I hope that right now we're rewriting this narrative of the stigma about mental health.
Yeah. I hope so too. Because for the people that have a hard time grasping onto the concept that you have control over your own narrative, therapy is where it is. I just ended my therapeutic relationship with my therapist last Friday. She and I have been working together for 8 years. She met me when I was 30 years old. And even when I moved to New York, I still continue with her. And I've been able to do the healing work. And that is what is required of all of us. Do our work. We cannot move beyond the illusion of separation. We cannot end systemic racism or chronic poverty or any of the other isms until we do our work. I mean, patriarchy is real, and it exists in church spaces at an astronomical rate that I was not aware of. And it stems from our spiritual leaders having compounded trauma that they have not resolved. And when you have compounded trauma that you have not resolved, it can look like narcissism. And narcissism is a mental health vulnerability. We see it in our government leadership. I mean, 45 is the epitome of narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be able to see that not only in him, but in ourselves. Because I'm not separated from Donald Trump.
Right.
Even though I don't like his legislation, there's several things that I can name that I don't like about him, but I'm not separate from him. I am another other. And when I can see him as me, that makes me think a little bit more about how I'm showing up in the world. What parts of myself and is my ego operating in a way that's unhealthy for the people around me or for the people that I'm ministering to or serving to? And so these are the types of questions that we have to wrestle with, not only as spiritual leaders, but as human beings. Living as spirit beings, I would say, living this human experience, because we're some powerful creatures, but we can't access the power if we're not tapped into our healing.
Yes. I mean, that is so inspiring to do that work, that real work that has to happen. So many folks are asking the question right now, like, well, how do you become an anti-racist church and space? And I honestly, I think that work happens in community, in breaking down systems and talking about it, in democratizing whose voices are heard. But I don't think it's happening in a book study per se, right? I think it's happening in that writing an inventory of my own behaviors and looking at myself in the mirror and reflecting that back. And thank you for saying it like that. Looking at folks that I judge, like, let's be honest, I judge them, but then saying, whoa, that's me judging them. We don't have to fall into some like weird self-hatred about judging, but then say, what about that touches something in me that is setting me off? So why is everybody freaking out? White folks are freaking out about racism in the world because it's in me,
Now, that's it, Darcy. That's it. In the same way it works on a micro level, it works on a macro level. We have to be able to see all of the stuff that we don't like, that are ugly, all of the shadowy parts that Carl Jung talks about. We have to see them in ourselves, because the shit it will not fix itself if we're not willing to see it and heal it. And that's all of it.
I love how Resma Menachem says metabolize it. Like, ooh, how much do I think about metabolism? Just
because that's so good and juicy.
Ooh, yeah, metabolize. Like, how do I metabolize something? You can't make your body metabolize something. You have to literally sit with it.
Absolutely. That's good.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, Kyndra, we have like run the whole gamut. Yes. And I want to honor time and I'm so excited just to say this to you, because I'm like, I'm a fan of yours. We've created at this physical space of Park Avenue a distance memorial healing site of healing. And so I'm going right after this with my family who helped me build it, and to meet a couple other folks who are, this is how they also work through trauma and anxiety and everything, is to like make some art. So we're going to go there and make some art and sit with too many photos of too many people and try to honor some new names that have been added to that list. God help us. But yeah, so I just, we didn't even get to talk about A Love Supreme. Because of stuff we were trying to do, I got to see a clip of it. Oh my gosh. It is going to be one of the most important films that I think will be in existence for real. And so I just want to bless you on that journey, and still want to connect if we can, Park Ave to that work.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. Oh, It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, I was thinking about how important Holler If You Hear Me has been, I
Mhm.
think, formationally and for Black queer Christians and others, right? Me. But this is like, I mean, it's just
Yeah,
even more
we
powerful.
wanted to be more than just a documentary series. I mean, shout out to my partner, Katina Parker, film partner. She is absolutely amazing and has been a filmmaker for 20 plus years. But she and I decided that it could not be just another series. It has to be a movement. And so you can find out about the documentary series at www.alovesupremedoc.com for more information. It is a work sample up there. We do have a trailer that we haven't released to the public yet that is really beautiful, but it features these families, these 8 people within these family systems, and we get a chance to go home with them. We get a chance to sit with them. Many of them are ordained ministers. Many of them are leaders in their own right, from Tony Michelle in Atlanta to myself. I'm also followed. Brendan Maxwell is in it at Columbia Seminary, as well as Reverend Aquarius Gilmer and so many others. But it is attached to a larger impact campaign.
Mhm.
And the impact campaign looks like creating master's classes that are led by LGBTQ folks, as well as our allies, to again deepen the education around cultural competency amongst LGBTQ community. It looks like retreats for families to be reconciled one to another. It looks like workshops to talk about gender constructs and the information that our families typically don't have access to within the African American community. And so that impact campaign is about 3 to 5 years long. And I am also beginning to work on what I'm calling the Reconciling Families Project to dive more deeply into what healing looks like
Mhm.
amongst our families. So yeah, I'm super excited about it.
Wow. And I think that that taps into some of what we're talking about in terms of like pride being co-opted and by whiteness, right? And yes, there exists some structures for families to cope with, cope to, begin to accept, let's say, their LGBTQIA folk, and there's like P flag and things, and those are so white centered.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, again, consciously, right? But there needs to be a conscious movement to include Black families that have a whole different paradigm that we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking of one person in particular that recently asked me from the Park Ave context, just like, do you have a way that you could talk to families about coming out? And it's like these things need to exist, and I think it's so specific, contextually, right? You can't generalize all Black families for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but the work needs to be, yeah, the work is so important, so
Yeah.
so important,
Yeah.
so important. Well, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for just
No,
talking about your morning ritual. It's so beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna probably text you later on the week just to say thank you again and to keep this connection going.
Next time I'm in Atlanta, I'll definitely be reaching out.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Reverend Kyndra Frazier, anything you want to send us with? I mean, everything you've been saying, I'm just like, yeah.
And yeah, I do want to send you all off with something. This is a passage that's been resonating with me for the past couple of months. And it's from Exodus. Um, and it says this is from the King James Version,
Yep.
Exodus 14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me to you. I want everybody to remember that the I am presence exists within all of us, and that I am that. When you pause and say I am, whatever you look at, say I am that, I am. If it's another person that you don't like, I am that, I am. So you can be more intentional about doing the fucking work, because it must be done.
This Wednesday, meditation, motivation.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Kyndra Frazier.
God bless you.
Bless you too.
All right. I love you.
Good rest of your day. Love you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. We have been talking to Reverend Kyndra Frazier. Just such a wonderful experience. These are our Pride Theology conversations. We have one more left next week. We're going to be talking to one more theologian, scholar, activist about Pride theology. So I hope you tune in next week, 9 a.m. on Wednesday. Peace, y'all. Love you.